November 17th will be the next test. We might start doing a little bit on the next text, get it out there, next test on Tuesday. But I will make sure that it will be focused on properly. And so I will look at your position papers today and tomorrow. Today and then Thursday, we'll talk about franchising. We'll look at emerging technologies and structures on Tuesday a little bit, and we will have our test on Thursday. This is just a place marker. It won't be on mine. The position paper 3 on conflict will be the last one. And since I've started like the others, there doesn't need to be a presentation. You could just simply drop them in the Dropbox. And that'll be fine. Okay. So this last, or not last, but second to last chapter is actually one of the most very interesting ones in my own mind. Look at that. I got 2 sets of glasses. Oh boy. Oh, that's good. So my truly great teacher by the name of Dr. Richard Vreeland was a man who set up many franchise systems and helped a lot of businesses franchise their companies. Dr. Vreeland used to say that franchising was the best way to get a lot of money and very little brains together and become a success. He's kind of kidding a little bit, but franchising is not an American invention, but one in which Americans have really blossomed and they're very, very successful at. It's a very unique one because it solves a lot of the issues that are in the traditional horizontal system and even in vertical integration. And it kind of has the best of all of the worlds together. So what is franchising? If you go down to the McDonald's over here and you go look at the takeout where the McDonald's is, you will see a plate there that says operated by such and such corporation with a phone number. And what that basically states, in essence, in one little plate is kind of the concept of what a franchise is. So in a structure for a franchising, it's intended to convince the end users that they're buying from a vertical integrated manufacturer. And so franchisors have 2 actors in their environment. One of them is called the franchisor, and the other is called the franchisee. The franchisor is the upstream manufacturer. Simple way to think of it is they're the manufacturer. And the basically flows in one way. And this is, if you would consider the retailer, that is the franchisee. Very, very simple design. The manufacturers are the main, the franchisers are the originators of the service, and the franchisees are separate companies that provide all of the downstream functions that need to be performed. Key phrase in this, and the one that I want you to put in your head, is that in a franchisee, a deliberate loss of separate identity is the hallmark of franchising. To the consumer, essentially, a franchise is one unit. When I go to McDonald's, My perception is I'm buying directly from McDonald's corporate, not like I'm buying from a separate organization, but you are. You're buying from an individual organization which has deliberately lost its identity in order to be perceived as a larger organization. And that's kind of the hallmark of it, okay? It's the franchisee assumes the identity of a franchisor. They are, as far as the company itself or as a consumer decided, they are McDonald's in every sense of the word. If you go down to modern Toyota, modern Subaru, or any of those other organizations, they're a little bit different of a type of franchisor. We'll talk about business format franchisors and brand franchisors. But it's important for you to understand is that those places where you go buy vehicles, those places actually are not Toyota. They are not Subaru. They are the modern, whatever their corporation is, an LLC or whatever. And they buy those automobiles from Subaru and from Toyota, and they represent Toyota in everything. The agreements require them to have a certain number of skilled technicians online. They must pass a certain amount of certification. There's a very strict ruling between the two of them. And once again, as I state, it's important to note that you're not buying from Subaru or from Toyota. You're buying from a unique, separate organization. You have two independent organizations that join forces to perform those functions with mutual benefit. Franchisees compromise their independence in order to develop this, and it's extremely important for them to maintain a viable, successful kind of arrangement, okay? Many times franchisees help franchisors in growth. Many times a franchisee will actually spin off onto its own organization once the contracts have run out, say, thank you very much. We know what we're doing right now. We're going to go on our way. One of the great discussions in franchising is, and I'll come up with this later. It's a good story. I'll talk about it later. All right. Just note that the franchisee maintains a separate business. They have their own balance sheet, their own income statement, and also that franchising is the fastest growing form of businesses in retailing right now. They started in the late 19th century. I was trying to get numbers out there. There are 75 industries which use franchises. There's 1.5 million stores out there that are under the franchise banner. It is, for the United States, franchising is magic. It's the simplest way to say it, all right? It allows the franchisor, we'll also talk about this as well, it allows the franchisor to be able to get help from his franchisee, but be able to control what it considers to be the most important concepts, which is the brand identity and the rigor that it believes that it needs in order to succeed. Yeah.
I was curious what you think about
that is one of the most franchising discussions between Wendy's and Carl Jr.'s and Hardee's. And it's a really interesting way. It was a marriage that was made in heck. Wendy's and Hardee's separated, but it was probably the best business divorce that you can think of. Carl survived, Hardee's survived, Wendy's survived. They're all stronger, but Carl's basically is a different identity from Hardee's. And I think it's great. Think about it this way. General Motors is not just one corporation. General Motors is Chevrolet, General Motors is Buick, General Motors is Cadillac, pretty much in the same way. The people who go to Carl's are not large, that's not what I mean, but a significant different market segment. than the people that go to the Hardee's. They're both winning. That's an amazing thing. I think so. And I think also it's a very clever way for Hardee's. There are businesses that are known as flanker businesses, all right? They're actually goods that are made and sold, not necessarily for their own success, but to stop other organizations from getting that territory. And so Carl's was kind of a flanking business to kind of head off that area, and they themselves succeed. I think it's great. Yeah, everybody knows they are. I mean, think of the economies of scale though together as a shopping group. You know, they shop together for common goods. They create their own, and then they separate them together. It's a great idea. I don't see anybody really that's in the food industry that's copied that idea to such a success. No.
Okay, Subaru, Toyota, one building.
Right.
I don't understand how they're competitors.
In a way, Toyota owns 25% of Subaru. And Toyota owns 15% of Mazda. And what those things did for them, and once again, those are separate organizations. They're not franchises. They deliberately have separations for each other. But one of the great things about Toyota buying that piece of Subaru and buying that piece of Mazda is the best transmissions, folks, in the world today are made by Toyota. No doubt about it. They're automatic transmissions. Excuse me. Let me also say that Stata in Eastern Europe has excellent, outstanding, and small end diesel engines. They're really good. But as far as the big three, they're the best. Toyota bought part of Subaru so that they had another outlet for their particular transmissions, and to be able to control, for another outlet for their own vehicles. So Toyota has a sports car, a big fancy sports car, but they don't make the sports car. It's actually made by Subaru. And so Subaru has that. They buy it from Subaru, they put it in Toyota, and now they slap the Toyota label. But if it's going to be a Toyota, it has to be expected to have a certain standard of quality. So my wife drives a Subaru. Spit it out, Dave. A Subaru. She loves it. It's a giant wagon, and it worried me at one time. Well, not really, but the acceleration on her Subaru was a lot better than the Toyota, and I couldn't figure it out. So I looked it up by the VIN number. It's a 4-cylinder engine. But you know what that 4-cylinder engine has? Yes. And one more thing that makes it faster than my 6-cylinder engine. Turbocharger. Yeah. The Toyota Subarus have a 2.4 liter turbocharge. What turbocharging, if you don't know, the fancy is it forces air into the engine and increases the efficiency mix so that it takes a little small power pack and makes them a lot faster. You can tell the turbocharger engine when you hit the gas and it hesitates for a second and then it jumps right out from you. That's what turbocharging does. So I'm going on. I apologize. You're on a subject I like to talk. So anyway, franchising, number one, fastest form of retailing. So why do we do franchising? What's the advantages? Well, if I have money and I have a desire to achieve, there are enormous risks that are involved in starting any business. In restaurants, 90% of all restaurants fail within the first 3 years. It's the highest rate of failure. Interesting enough, 60% of all hardware stores succeed. Kind of a flip of the model. There are so many things. If you've never going into business, doing all of the big things, you've got to do the quarterly 940 taxes. You have to make sure that you put away money especially for payroll, all of those things. It's really, really difficult. And for a corporation or somebody who has the desire and the money, buying a franchise may be the best combination. Because in essence, what you buy is you buy a package that will help you get one door down to success. All right. So a franchisor develops this format, this business format that kind of represents a prepackaged solution to quote all of your problems. It doesn't solve them all. Certainly it can't solve the external environment in which you work in, but it does a pretty darn good job. And so there are three benefits that come from coming into a franchise. One of them is you get a standardized startup package that helps you hit the ground running. The next is you get ongoing benefits. And by that, what it means is all of the weekly reports that you're forced to, that a franchise is forced to mail, what they do is those reports go upstream to the franchisors. They put them in their AI, artificial intelligence software that looks at the potential for difficulties that you might have down the road, and they provide you with managerial consultation. You've got another partner with big shoulders to help you out. And then there are competitive advantages to franchise as well. It's a good mix, all right? It's a good mix. So I'm going to show this screen up, but you don't have to write on it yet. I just want to show you that this is where things start. And these are the three advantages that come with a startup package. So the first thing that a franchisor will do for the franchisee is find the best site for your particular franchise. Now, anybody got an idea how much that land where the McDonald's is in town, how much that land is worth? Anybody want to guess?
I'd say at least 2 million.
It's $2 million. Yeah. You know how much, you want to guess how much that corner where the Wendy's is worth?
Probably more than that at some point.
4 million. That, ironically, that Wendy's store is the #1 producer in the entire Western Carolinas. It is a 100% site. That it's not just a happenstance that it's 2 floors. I mean, that is a moneymaker from the day one. And there's always in real estate, there's what's known as a 100% site, which is where 100% of the traffic in an area will pass around. And in Boone, the 100% site is that corner. Anybody who owns or has anything in that corner is golden, all right? And then everything that spreads out. So imagine yourself, you're owning a franchise. Can you imagine if I had to sink $4 million into real estate at that time? One of the things that McDonald's brings, which is kind of a benefit and a loss, is McDonald's owns the land that every one of their franchisees is on. The franchisees own the store. And that's how it works. The franchisees have the right and the ability to build that store in whatever way it's wish, as long as it's one of the, I think there's like 15 accepted models that McDonald's does inside. McDonald's does a site analysis. They plan the routes in and out to be able to move traffic through efficiently. Whereas others like Budget Rent-A-Car just says you can in this area, and you can build wherever you want. Enterprise Rent-A-Car is one of the unique ones. Enterprise Rent-A-Car was built as a franchise around the concept that people need automobiles more than just at airports. That people need a second automobile for traveling, especially if it's a long distance, or just in case their other vehicle is being repaired for stuff. And so the enterprise, their site selection, make sure that it's in around suburban areas, and that's why they are where they are. Now, it doesn't mean that they're not at airports, they certainly are, okay? So the first thing is selecting the site. The next is, and unquestionably, when you have a brand name, you immediately have a clientele. You have those individuals who've been waiting for that particular thing to come in, and once they get there, correct. My wife and I are Pizza Hut maidens, all right? We love Pizza Hut. Don't ask why. What? Yes, they're great. I like Pizza Hut. I mean, if I'm going to choose a pizza that has to be delivered or whatever, I actually drive 3 places. I swear to you, because I do my own delivery. Okay, so I go to Papa John's for my youngest or my oldest daughter because she likes the thin. Okay, I go to Pizza Hut for me and my wife, and my mother-in-law from Sweden is in, and she needs gluten-free, so I go to Hungry Howie's. So I make the loop, and I get pizza for everyone, and everybody's happy. But as I'm saying, when the Pizza Hut went out of business, that was nuts to me. I couldn't figure out why. I mean, what are you going to do with that building other than put another pizza building? They flattened it and they put the gas station up. So the brand name brings people. The moment that Starbucks put their foot down right next to the grocery store there, Publix, they had a clientele. The last is the economies of scale. For all of the reasons that retailers need wholesalers to be able to pool their resources together, the exact same reason is what franchisers do. Franchisers can basically pool all of the resources together to be able to buy as a single unit and to buy in bulk and to buy with steep discounts. Not only that, but if I have McDonald's on my resume and say I'm a franchisee in with McDonald's, one of the first things that any loan officer will do in any bank is say, how much of a letter of credit do you need? All right. They will be very happy because usually what happens especially is that you're given all of the status that a McDonald's would. So yes, absolutely. The economies of scale are winners.
Who bought the McDonald's?
Pardon me?
You know who bought the McDonald's business?
No, I don't.
Yeah,
Who did?
there's a new owner. I don't know who that.
Oh, wow. Well, that's what's happened to the car lines. Okay.
Yeah.
Because the car lines now, I mean, when you have kids, but, like, and I be very patient, but now, man, the car lines at McDonald's are like, they're moving like Chick-fil-A, okay? And we'll talk about Chick-fil-A on Thursday. One of the most amazing stories in the world. Chick-fil-A is the #1 revenue maker per store. McDonald's makes more, but they make $2.1 million every year per store, where Chick-fil-A makes $4.1 million per store. It's astronomical how much Chick-fil-A generates in revenue.
One less day in business.
With one less day in business. Yeah, it is quite amazing. It is. Chick-fil-A was the first one to go away from the drive-in window to the drive-in door. So if you go to a Chick-fil-A, if you notice, they don't have a window, the whole door opens up. Chick-fil-A's goes directly to the individual's location. They have equal or greater numbers on their drive up as they do in anywhere else. I've been in this one is one of them, but I've seen Chick-fil-A's with 2 loops around, double lines, and take less than 3 minutes from ordering to going out.
They used to do that in Greensboro
Yeah.
at Yeah, for those 5 minutes, you know, on the other side of the line, you're gonna get served.
It's crazy, yes. Important note, this very top line is going to be a test thought. It's important to note that franchising is not a system for launching a business. You can launch a business, but for running a business. And that's what makes franchising so valuable. Once the business launches, because everybody starts out great, there's a constant program of field supervision, which allows the individuals, when you're filling out your weekly reports, as I was saying, to take that information, give you an idea whether or not you're in trouble or whether you have smooth sailing, and to recommend, based upon contractual obligations, some kinds of ways of creating a success. You're usually required weekly reports, monthly or semi-monthly reports. When I was with Radio Shack, when they were in their heyday, this was 1982, we did daily reports. And so this is back to, this isn't even internet. This is a intranet that was developed by Radio Shack, with every franchise would call in every afternoon using dial-up hookup. They'd take their program, they'd run their software, they'd balance their books, and that information was sent every day. They were 40 years ahead of the time. Of course, the technology was a lot different. All right. The benefit, allow the franchisor to offer feedback to assist the franchisee, because we're all in this together. Every success that a franchisee has, the franchisor has as well. Kind of also goes back, you know, in personal selling, I always talk about this, in personal selling, many times, or you might have a salesperson that makes more than the CEO. Why in the heck would the CEO care how much a salesperson makes? If they're making money, you know, by other than if it's unethically or illegally, you got a good horse, ride it. Okay. In terms of the competitive advantage, the last thing, franchisors act as consolidators. They create an economic scale. And because everybody is moving in the same direction, there's a synergistic effect. Everybody's pulling in the same way. The franchisors can focus on a single product line and maximize that particular profit line and develop those benefits. They focus on the brand itself. It's why Chick-fil-A came out with chicken soup, a natural. It's why they focus on the things that they buy, because it's all one direction. I don't even know what to do with Cracker Barrel serving beer and wine. Yeah, go in Cracker Barrel. We serve beer and wine now. You know, yeah. You're kidding. Mimosas? Oh my God.
Perfect cure for anything.
Yeah, right.
Not that I know anything.
Not that you know anything about it. I've got a Jimmy Buffett song going in my head. Passed out in my hammock. God, I slept away past it. Anyway, the other thing that it does is, one of the difficulties with any kind of consistent industry is it prevents free riding. So one party doesn't reap the benefits and another party bears the cost. Everybody gets along, because what happens is the franchisor, the one with the big shoulders, says, this is your territory and this is where you remain. All right, everybody wins. And the other thing is that it guarantees consistency, and that attracts customers. It builds brand equity for itself and its franchisees. Holiday Inn at one time had only two models in which they built their hotels. One traditional and one they called the Holodome. All right. Their commercial in the 70s and 80s was the best surprise is no surprise. You could actually go into a Holiday Inn in one town and it would be exactly the same in scope and whatever as one in another. They changed that model, of course, and then they're considering only the functions that are important, okay? So this is the competitive advantage that you have working in a franchise environment. So what are the benefits to a franchisor? So many franchisors have outstanding, brilliant ideas. But the ideas do not allow for a sustainable advantage. In other words, they can be copied. Successful franchisors have to get out there with that idea and achieve what's known as first mover advantage. And so they're on the cusp of a major change. Chick-fil-A has been around since 76, I believe, is when they started. Chicken fast food. Chicken was the most difficult thing to fast food franchise for two reasons. The biggest is it requires just a certain amount of time to cook the chicken, and chicken also very easily can be overcooked. We've all had it. Chicken has like a very narrow window when you have success. Well, there was this guy in Kentucky by the name of Colonel Sanders who came up with this process where the chicken is pressurized, and the pressurized chicken cooks at an ideal temperature at the exact time, fast enough for fast food franchises. At the same time, there's this other group in Atlanta with Chick-fil-A who came up with the same idea almost at the same time, but they decided instead of doing whole pieces of chicken, they would do it as chicken in terms of like sandwiches.
They used to be the dwarf house, right?
Yes, exactly.
I
Yeah,
wrote a paper about it.
yeah.
Freshman year.
Isn't that cool? Yeah, I mean,
I
it's-
used to work
oh, you did?
at,
Did you, was it a good experience? I have no idea.
not really,
Yeah.
no. It's a lot going on all at one time, so like, it might look really great on the outside, but it's just so much going on.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of hectic.
We used to say it's like sausage, it's delicious at the other end, but you don't want to watch the process,
Extremely clean though.
Yeah,
Everything's very clean, like we would stay until like 11:30 at night, cleaning everything, because they don't have a cleaning crew.
isn't that amazing? And the chicken franchises, the successful ones are like that. Colonel Sanders was known as being a bully in a way. If he went into a franchise and it was not clean, he would yank their license at that moment. There's legends of him. I don't want to give away because it's such a cool story. But anyway, there are stories of him throwing the pots out in the middle of the street when he found that there was excess of dirt anywhere. He was a believer in cleanliness, and especially with chicken for some reason, especially with grease. There's always the danger of just stuff. It requires a lot from the workers, I agree. To their credit, the reason why KFC and Chick-fil-A, along with their food is tasty because people like yourself did a lot of work to make it that. Okay.
Well, they're only open 6 days a week.
I know.
And
Yeah,
4 million. That's amazing.
it is amazing. It really is. I'm gonna go on a little bit about Chick-fil-A, if you don't mind. In order to be a Chick-fil-A franchisee, the franchise fee is only $4,000. But the requirement, the pass-through takes 2 years. They don't let anyone in to be a franchisee. You make a very good living, but if you're a franchisee of Chick-fil-A, you cannot make 50% of your income or more in something else other than Chick-fil-A. They expect you to devote yourself to that. And of course, How do you define success? I mean, you know, they found their way, and it is their amazing way, and they work, and it works successfully. All right. So you've got this great idea, but you got to get it out first so that somebody else doesn't steal it. So you get it out there. The fastest way to do it is to invite people to buy into your business. And that's what a franchisee does. They find people that are willing to make investments into your system, that have sufficient financial resources. And what that also helps them to do for the franchisors is that the people who started in the business have the ability, once they understand the business in the corporate world, to actually create their own franchises as well. It becomes a great conduit for talent, both down to the franchise system and then up to the corporate structure as well. It incentivizes the staff. It gives them the sense of loyalty and pride of ownership, and it provides a vision to those local circumstances. And the other thing that a franchisor does is whatever ideas come from the franchisees, they will readily adopt. So the fish sandwich came from Louisiana. During the time of Lent, the 40 days of Lent, Louisiana is predominantly Catholic. On Fridays, there's kind of a Sado thing where you don't eat meat, but you can eat fish. And so the fish sandwich in smaller ones or smaller stores is quite popular. And so the McDonald's saw this happening, the franchisees brought the ideas up, and we have a fish sandwich just because of that. So once again, they act as a way of listening to the best ideas that come from their downstream partners. So this is an example of Pizza Hut. So Asian cultures traditionally dislike cheese, and you hate to use, you know, bland kinds of generalizations because not everything is true. But there is a somewhat cultural frame that cheese is not part of their diet, and they're not necessarily happy with it. They developed a Cheetos in South Korea, which I spent 7 weeks in South Korea. So they want to develop a Cheetos that South Koreans would eat. And they came up with a flavor, Kobe beef. And so if you go to South Korea, you'll see Kobe beef Cheetos. So in other words, it's Cheetos without cheese, okay? Now, William Heineke said, forget this, I'll pay my fees, I'll go ahead and do it, and I'll become what's called a master franchisor. In other words, what I will do is I will go into that area, I will do what I can to develop it, and then I will also sign up other franchisees if I am successful. Well, lo and behold, he swam against the current. There's a large business in Thailand, they're in Vietnam, Indonesia. You know, the franchisor may not know the best, but franchisees can solve the problems that a national office don't necessarily get, all right? There is always the difficulty in any office with the problem of talking to each other, that you very rarely talk to others. And the franchise system has this way of talking to each other instead of talking past each other that works great. Now, having said that, of course, I'm always contrary. There are many reasons why you don't franchise. And once again, a contradiction. This is not always true either. Starbucks stores that are standalone are owned 100% by Starbucks and not a franchise. Starbucks, however, in airports, in other countries, they can be franchised. The difficulty, of course, with franchising is that you can expand too quickly. And that the errors in the structure itself can propagate across the system and become part of an established environment. And so what happens is you take one error and you extrapolate it over 5 or 10,000 times. For a decade, the fastest franchise growing of all was, I'm going blank, Subway. Okay, Subway. So Subway, one of the things that helped it grow so quickly is it had one of the lowest franchise fees to start in anywhere. It allowed even small mom and pop convenience stores to buy the franchise and be able to put in those. All they needed to do is make sure that they satisfied the requirements for cleanliness and area and those kind of things. But the difficulty with the way that Subway did it, it's a blessing and a curse in a way, is that Subway success happens through daily deliveries. So the food is always fresh, and it was one of those things that they held on to for many years. Well, Subway, yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Corporate was succeeding on the backs of the franchisees. Absolutely. And that's where the money was generated from. Yeah, absolutely. And the problem with that is, of course, is eventually you run out of room. You know, you've got, I think it's like 20,000 franchises across the United States. Maybe there are. Yeah, yeah. It's and once again, they did not have that boundaries to stop the free riding, unfortunately. And depending on who you were in a company, the investment was a minimum or a maximum. So you'd have a Subway that would be an entire store, or a Subway that was just, just one area in the store. So it was, the models were kind of mixed. Well, when Subway started getting into trouble in around 2018 and 2019, someone in corporate came up with a brilliant idea of let's not do shipments once a day, let's do them once a week. And the quality of the ingredients went down, because it's not like, we're talking about vegetables, we're talking about tomatoes and cucumbers and all of those things where freshness absolutely demands it. And all it took was one word among their customers saying, Subway stuff isn't fresh anymore. And it broke the whole structure. They went back to every day, but they've had difficulties now that they're still trying to fight.
Well, like Jersey Mike's.
Yeah, I like Jersey Mike's too. Yeah. The key behind any successful franchise, folks, to me, is a narrow group of items that you sell, and you do those very well. Okay. When you start spreading out the menus, you're starting to get into difficulties. I worked as a cook at IHOP, and we had 240 separate food items on our menu. And it's just too much. You have to have all of those things in stock. What's the place on King Street? The restaurant, McAdoo's. All right. I look at McAdoo's menu. I was just overwhelmed by the number of choices. And I have seen them kind of reduce that, which makes a lot of sense, because you just can't have too many items. It'll kill you. Okay. So, having said that, with so many ways that we can do franchises, what are the strategies for franchise? What are the ways that we have success? So, there are two types of business format strategies. They are known as product and trade name franchising strategies. And the other known as business format strategies. There are enormous fundamental differences, especially when they have to do with the investment in the products that the franchise has. Traditional franchising strategies for fast food is the business format. But for other things such as tire stores, automobile dealerships, those kind are what are known as product and trade names. So, what's the difference? A product and trade name franchise is an authorized franchise system in which the dealers sell a product or a product line while using the trade name for promotional purposes. Okay, let me explain it. Mr. Tire is an example of a product or trade name franchising strategy. Mr. Tire has a unique separate identity. You recognize it not as a Michelin dealership, you recognize it as an independent store. Mr. Tire sells Michelin, sells Goodyear, sells Pirelli, and they sell a couple of other brands that I'm not familiar with. Mr. Tire has the rights to use those products in their promotion, their lines. The dealers have an established brand name, and the consumers look for Mr. Tire versus those brand names. The trade name franchising strategy has its own unique footprint and provides its own services that aren't necessarily connected with Michelin or with Pirelli or with Goodyear, but with Mr. Tire itself. The stores that you pass, the furniture stores going down the hill through Lenore, all of those would be product and trade name franchises. The contracts require them to have a certain established level of quality. They're required to have a certain certification. They are contractually bound in many ways to all of the things of a business format strategy, but they do it their own way. That's at the retail level. The wholesale level is kind of unique because at the wholesale level, they allow you to bottle and distribute non-alcoholic and alcoholic beverages. They give you the product which is needed to create the Pepsis and the Mountain Dews and the Cokes and all of those. But your bottling company is not called Coca-Cola Bottling Company. It might have something in that name, but generally, once again, they're thought of as being separate. These companies make their money on the profits, on the margins by selling to the dealers. And so the franchisor, once again, takes title and physical possession of the goods. And once that happens, the producers, they kind of wipe their hands on it. They go away. Dr. Pepper.
They're big.
Yes.
So they bother me.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. It's another thing to note that there's no single major distributor owned by those because quite simply, it's impossible to have a single bottler across the United States. It just can't happen. Okay.
And you get free there.
That's right. Every day. Yeah. I had I'll go into that one time. The business format strategy, the ones that you see with McDonald's, you get an entire way of doing business under a brand name. This is the one with the separate loss of identity. A franchise can be considered a package of industrial and intellectual property rights in which you cannot violate. So the franchisee does the paperwork. They, in essence, act as, in essence, as they are corporate as the franchisor. The way the franchisor makes money is fees from the franchisees. Whereas the product name franchise makes their money on selling the product. The franchisee does, but they also get a royalty. And so before the McDonald's franchise ever makes a single penny of profit, they first pay 9% to McDonald's before they even pay the light bill. Seems kind of tough, but it works out. And because the franchisees go by the contracts and they're happy with it, they're okay with it. Business format franchising can be considered the predominant one, especially in fast foods. But as I said before, depending on the goods that's being sold, especially if it's the product quality that doesn't change. I should also say that if you think about fast food, the goods are shipped to them, but they're processed in such a way that they become a desirable object. In a brand name franchise, the product already exists, and all they're doing is moving it from one location to the next and making sure that the franchisee is taking care of its goods. So, before I go, I want to see if I have this. Okay. So, this is a man by the name of Duncan Hines. I don't know if you've ever heard of that name before. Yeah, Duncan Hines. You might have seen it in the stores. Duncan Hines was a salesperson from the 20s to the 40s who sold across the United States, traveled with his wife, they were devoted to each other. They never went anywhere without each other. And Duncan Hines especially made his sales during the 30s when he was traveling, especially during the Depression. Now, the difficulty with that, of course, is that there were no franchises at that time. You didn't know if the hotel you're going to stay in was good or whether the place next door to it, whether the food was good or not. His wife kept copious notes about everywhere they went across the United States. And so what happened is, after a decade of building this up, he had actually created a diary of the best places to eat, the best places to sleep, and it extended everywhere. He was at a party in the 40s, and his friends said, "This is wonderful. You got to be able to, you should publish this." And this was the birth of what was known as the Duncan Hines list. It doesn't exist anymore, but the name Duncan Hines certainly does, because the name, if you notice, is on cakes and everything. The name Duncan Hines became a badge of quality. If you were on the Duncan Hines list, you were doing well. He sold his name there. His family is in wealth forever because of the work he and his wife did. So he's traveling across Kentucky in the 50s, and he stops at this restaurant, bar, truck stop, or whatever. And there's a gentleman in there in his 60s who's serving chicken. And the chicken is so incredibly good that he cannot believe it. He writes it down in the Duncan Hines list, and it becomes a boom. And so this guy from this particular location, it becomes the place to go in Kentucky. That guy's by the name of Harlan Sanders. Harlan Sanders, all of a sudden, in the franchise boom, suddenly realizes that he has something going on and that this is really good. There's things that he insisted on, however, the group that came to him, the franchising, Harlan Sanders was the hammer. He refused to make any kinds of give-ins for quality. He believed in everything. He required stainless steel pieces in order to do it. He was an enormously successful man. Well, along the way, this gentleman who happened to be working in the Kentucky Fried Chickens started when he was 13 years old. And by the time he was 17, he was an assistant store manager and was seen by Harlan Sanders and was noted for his abilities and all like that. This man learned on the shoulder of Harlan Sanders that quality is the number one important thing, and that stands above everything else. And so this gentleman said that everything that he ever learned that was important, he learned from Harlan Sanders, and he took along with him along this way. He was an orphan. And so he almost was like a father figure to them. This man went off and became a success, and he started Wendy's. Wendy's, the name actually was because his daughter was developmentally disabled, and she had difficulty speaking up to the age of 4.5. And so her name is actually something different. But Wendy is what she answered to, and that's why he started Wendy's. Or that's why the name is Wendy's. The number one thing that he always believed in was quality, and quality is where Wendy's is and where it always will be. And so I kind of want you to get this idea that so many things happen because of connections from one thing to the other, to the other, to the other. And one of the things that franchising does is it pays this pathway to success built upon the individuals who start the first threads. And so now we have Wendy's. Wendy's, by the way, tried to be bought by Hardee's. There was an uproar in it, and it was led actually by Dave Thomas's daughter, the Wendy, to split them up again. And so she actually owns 26 stores in Ohio. She does not own Wendy's or Dave Thomas's money. It's all part of the foundation. She is independently wealthy. She did it on her own. It was the best thing that ever happened to Hardee's, the best thing that happened to Carl's, and the best thing that happened to Wendy's, that all three of these organizations went together. Okay, you listened to me long enough. Let's go. I'll see you Thursday. Have a good one.